You're allowed to book your wife?
I am. Isn't that great? It was so fun. It's really, it's been a dream of mine for a while, and now people can listen to it.
You know, Susan has long threatened that if I ever really start taking this show for granted, if I start taking the show for granted, if I stop appreciating it, she's going to come in one day and Bigfoot it, and she's going to take a burner cell phone, she's going to put it here on the desk, and she's going to take on-air gardening calls for an hour to make me appreciate how good it is to have this job.
That's good of her. You can lose sight sometimes. I'm happy to hear that.
Well done, my friend. Thank you. And thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. If you'd like to vote for Susan to host the next Rachel Maddow Show, taking your calls live on the air about gardening tips, you can vote. You can't at all. All right. Happy Monday. You know, there's been a lot of public complaining by the president. There's been a lot of all capital letters misspelled tweeting by the president. There's been a lot of cheerleading by the president for people who go on the Fox News channel and make arguments disparaging the FBI or Robert Mueller or the special counsel's investigation into the Russia issue. There's been a lot of noise, a lot of complaining, a lot of yelling. But if you clear aside all that noise, if you treat this president and this administration as a silent movie, and you pay no attention to what they say and you only observe what they do, it really is twice now that the president has taken official action as president to try to thwart the Russia investigation. The first time was a year ago when he fired the FBI director, James Comey, the president later explaining that it was the Russia investigation that was on his mind when he made the decision to do that. So that was the first time. He didn't just complain or sort of squawk about the investigation, he actually did something. That was a year ago. Now, a year later, for a second time, he has acted. This time, he ordered a Justice Department investigation of the Russia investigation. He wants the people investigating him to themselves be subject to a DOJ investigation, which he is demanding. The president has made a lot of noise. He's expressed a lot of opinions. He has taunted and derided people about the Russia investigation in his usual way. But when we're talking about action, we're talking about overt actions he's taken as president, using the power of the presidency to affect some sort of change when it comes to that Russia investigation. What happened with him yesterday, with him demanding this investigation, that's basically only the second time he's acted overtly and officially to interfere with the Justice Department to try to affect that inquiry. That said, to the extent that the Justice Department has been interfered with, at least a few times, as it has tried to conduct this inquiry, it should also be noted that the Justice Department hasn't exactly been a brick house here. The Justice Department itself has been swaying a little bit in these prevailing winds, not just in the face of the president's actions, but even just his squawking, even just his making noise to put pressure on the Justice Department and the investigation. We saw it first around the Comey firing. You might remember that Comey's firing was bolstered by a memo from Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, which attested to a fictitious premise that Comey was being fired because he'd been so unfair to Hillary Clinton in the Clinton email investigation during the campaign. We know that was a fictitious premise because we're not dumb, but also because within 48 hours of that memo being released and Comey getting fired, the president himself went on NBC News and said, actually, I fired Comey because of Russia. The president also explained to high-ranking Russian officials who turned up at a surprise visit to the Oval Office, he told them that firing Comey would relieve the great pressure that had been on him over the Russia investigation. That's all over now. I mean, the president was clearly going to fire James Comey. He admits he was going to fire him because of the Russia investigation, to try to thwart that investigation. Given that, why did the Justice Department, why did the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein specifically have to help the president with that by providing this false cover story about Comey, to make it seem like Comey was being fired for some other reason? Why did the Justice Department do that? Justice Department also showed itself to be responsive to pressure from Republican members of Congress and conservative media when they released to Congress and to reporters personal text messages between two FBI officials. Even those officials were still serving at the FBI, and their personal relationship and their text message conversations were at that time the subject of an ongoing investigation by the department's Inspector General. I mean, the Justice Department, of all agencies, is well within its right to say, sorry, that matter is the subject of an ongoing investigation. The public will not have access to any internal documents relevant to that investigation until the investigation is complete. Right? Everybody can say that when there's ongoing investigations, right? But the Justice Department in particular, they could have said that when it came to the text messages between two FBI officials, but instead they just released the texts, gave them to reporters, gave them to Congress. Why did they do that? They did not have to do that. Justice Department also released James Comey's memos that he had written about his interactions with President Trump before he was fired. By all accounts, those memos are believed to be key evidence in the obstruction of justice inquiry into the president's behavior. That obstruction of justice inquiry is still underway, but the Justice Department nevertheless handed over that key evidence in the middle of that investigation. Why did the FBI and the Justice Department do that? Justice Department and the FBI also have shed nearly all of the senior officials who were corroborating witnesses for James Comey at the time he wrote up those memos, when he was documenting his interactions with the president, because those interactions were very irregular, they were seemingly improper. Comey wrote those memos to document those interactions. He confided in other senior law enforcement officials at the time in order to create a record of those interactions with the president in case it someday needed to be used as evidence. The Justice Department and the FBI have since shed or demoted most of those officials who Comey confided in, while the president has led a systematic campaign of attacking them one by one, often by name. Within the Justice Department, the Inspector General investigation into one of those corroborating witnesses, into FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, that investigation was inexplicably accelerated to match a time frame demanded by President Trump. So Andrew McCabe would not just get in trouble from that IG report, he would get in trouble by a specific date that would result in him losing his accumulated pension from decades of service at the FBI. The Inspector General investigates all sorts of allegations and issues within the Justice Department and the FBI. There's no other known instance in which they have pursued that kind of an investigation on a specifically accelerated time frame to make sure they nailed that official in a way that would inflict maximum public humiliation and maximum financial pain. But the president explicitly demanded that when it came to the case of Andrew McCabe, and that is what the Inspector General did. Why'd they do that? They didn't have to do that. Justice Department also did push back initially on demands from pro-Trump Republican members of Congress when those members of Congress wanted to see FISA warrant applications that were used to obtain a court's permission to conduct surveillance on a former Trump campaign aide named Carter Page. The members of Congress supporting President Trump demanded to see those warrant applications. The Justice Department initially pushed back. I mean, FISA warrants and FISA warrant applications, that kind of information is very, very highly secret. It's never handed over. They never even admit to the existence of FISA warrants in public. But in this case, they caved. They handed over those FISA warrant applications to Congress. As far as we know, that is totally unprecedented. Why did they do that? They did not have to do that. They've never done it before. They also handed over to Congress what's called the electronic communication, which is a very generic sounding name. In this specific instance, it is a term of art, which means they handed over the initial document, we think it's a 2-page long document, that created the Russia investigation at the FBI. The initial document setting out the investigation and setting it in motion. Justice Department handed that over. All these things were handed over to Congress. All this information about an ongoing investigation that the Justice Department nevertheless decided to share with Trump-supporting members of Congress in the middle of that investigation. And there's no, honestly, we're being realistic here, there's no reason to believe that those documents and that information only went as far as Congress. Why wouldn't pro-Trump members of Congress just convey that stuff directly to the White House once they got their hands on it? Right? It might help the president in his defense. If you're the subject of a criminal inquiry, imagine how helpful it would be to have access in the middle of that investigation to the prosecutor's theory of the case when they open their investigation into you, to have their physical written documents about what they were coming after you for. I mean, to have the supporting materials that were shown to a judge in order to justify a surveillance warrant against somebody who was working for you. Yeah, that would be very helpful if you were the subject of a criminal investigation, to have that kind of window in the middle of the investigation into the prosecutor's approach and their evidence and their strategy. I mean, the Justice Department, incrementally, piece by piece, has just been handing all of this stuff over. And when they hand it over to pro-Trump members of Congress, presumably those pro-Trump members of Congress are just directing that stuff to the attention of the White House and the president and his legal team so they can help him in his case. None of this is the way things usually are done. And honestly, however this all shakes out, what's already been done by the Justice Department in the past year and a half will inflect forever any future assertion by the government that they can't hand something over because it pertains to an ongoing investigation. Forever now. There is a rejoinder to that. Oh yeah, look what you did during the Trump administration. Look at all that ongoing investigative material that you handed over. They've already broken those norms for the Trump presidency. Why have they done that? I don't know. But even with that very difficult history of the last year, now the Justice Department is crossing yet another Rubicon. When the president demanded yesterday that the Justice Department open an investigation into the way the Russia investigation has been conducted, the Justice Department responded instantly by saying, yes, sir, will do. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein announcing right after the president tweeted his demand yesterday, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein responded that, in fact, yes, the Justice Department would direct the Inspector General to investigate the president's latest claims that there's something terrible and improper about the Russia investigation into him and his campaign. It was only 3 weeks ago that Rod Rosenstein gave those dramatic public remarks at an event in Washington where he insisted that the Justice Department will not be extorted. He gave an eloquent series of public remarks about the importance of the rule of law and the Justice Department maintaining its independence and not bending to any external pressure or threats. But now, 3 weeks later, Rod Rosenstein and the Justice Department are letting the president and his supporters in Congress cross another line in the sand to encroach on and in some ways get access to this ongoing investigation that really is about him and his campaign. And it's not like acceding to these demands is buying them all that much breathing room. After Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein announced that he would tell the Inspector General to start investigating the president's new claims about the Russia inquiry, well, the president today summoned Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and the director of the FBI, summoned them to come to the White House to talk about this matter. I mean, step back from that for a second. Under normal circumstances, it would be astonishing for the president to summon the head of the Justice Department and the head of the FBI to come to the White House to discuss the ongoing case against him. But that is what happened today. It wasn't like a meeting with the White House counsel. It was the president calling them up there to meet with him, to talk about the investigation into him. And then it appears to have gotten worse. At least it appears to have gotten worse. We're not totally sure what happened thereafter. Republican members of Congress for several weeks now have been demanding that the Justice Department should also give them all information that the department has concerning a confidential source who reportedly made contact with 3 people on the Trump campaign who were believed to have some sort of contact with Russian agents while Russia was interfering in the election. I mean, even in the abstract, that kind of information is the holy grail for the Justice Department and the FBI, right? You don't out your confidential sources. If you do, why would anybody ever be a confidential source for the FBI ever again? You don't reveal the identities of your sources who take action and collect information surreptitiously for the FBI or for the CIA. You don't expose them because you don't want to endanger those sources. You don't want to blow any investigations they might be part of in an ongoing way. That's supposed to be sacrosanct, right? Well, in this case, Republican Congressman Devin Nunes, the head of the Intelligence Committee in the House, his subpoena for information about the confidential source that talked to members of the Trump campaign, his subpoena reportedly demands all information that the Justice Department has related to that individual, which means what Devin Nunes has demanded from the Justice Department is not just the identity of that source and what actions he has taken on behalf of the U.S. government while operating in a covert capacity. That subpoena would also appear to be an effort to pry out of the Justice Department whatever evidence he turned up, whatever information and evidence that informant was able to turn up when, in fact, he talked to people on the Trump campaign about Russia, what Russia was doing. I mean, the Justice Department has been sliding down this slippery slope for months, handing over the kind of information they never release about ongoing investigations. But the identity of a confidential source, all Justice Department records about that source, the evidence that source was able to turn up in an investigation that is still ongoing, you're going to hand that over to people like Congressman Nunes, who is absolutely going to turn around and hand that to the president whose campaign is being investigated here? I mean, that's insane. He was a senior official on the Trump transition. He was a part of the Trump campaign. You're going to give him this documentation, the kind of information you never hand over about any investigation, you're going to hand it to him in the middle of the investigation? That's insane. After Rod Rosenstein and Christopher Wray, the FBI director, were summoned to the White House today, the White House communications director then released a sort of vague statement which implied that this insane eventuality had come to pass. Quote, "It was agreed that White House Chief of Staff John Kelly will immediately set up a meeting with the FBI, the Justice Department, and the Director of National Intelligence, together with congressional leaders, to review highly classified and other information they have requested." Review highly classified and other information they have requested. Does that mean the Justice Department is going to slide further down the slope today and actually hand over this information that Nunes has tried to subpoena from them, this information on their confidential source and whatever evidence he gathered in the Trump campaign? We don't really know. Here's how the Washington Post put it tonight. I thought they summed up the ambiguity here pretty well. Quote, "The significance of that statement was not immediately clear. Justice Department leaders have fought vigorously against revealing to Congress materials on the confidential source. It was not clear whether they had backed down from their position and would now allow Republican leaders to look at the documents, and whether there would simply be a follow-up meeting for further discussion." So the Washington Post is saying, okay, they had this meeting, they're summoned to the White House for the president to talk to him about his case. Then afterwards, they're setting up a meeting where members of Congress are going to get this information they're demanding. What are they actually going to get? We followed up as well with the Justice Department tonight to find out if, in fact, the Justice Department is handing over the documents that Nunes has subpoenaed on this FBI confidential source. Justice Department spokeswoman Sarah Isgur Flores clarified to us tonight that the exact word choice, the specificity of the White House statement on this is important. We put that statement back up there, yeah. So the White House statement said specifically that this meeting will be set up with congressional leaders to review highly classified and other information that they have requested. Information that they have requested is not the same as documents that they have requested. From the Justice Department spokesperson, information is different than documents. Okay. So it sounds like Justice Department, the FBI, and the Director of National Intelligence have agreed to maybe brief congressional leaders, maybe describe information to them about this confidential source, but not hand them pieces of paper, not hand them documents related to this source, which is what Republicans have been trying to get. So that's where we think we are. At least that's the insight we have into the ambiguity tonight. Bottom line, how's the old rule of law holding up? How are the institutions of law enforcement in this country and counterintelligence holding up against pressure from a president and his supporters in Congress who are leaning on them with all their might? Sort of depends on how you look at it right now. Either Rod Rosenstein and the Justice Department are pursuing a strategy of appeasement, which never works. You keep giving in to increasing demands for more and more information and more compromise of the independence of the department, and it'll never be enough. And all you do is make yourself weaker with every new concession, with every new unprecedented encroachment on the investigation and its integrity. Bad.